Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello, welcome back. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. And before we get going today with our special guest, Kevin Miller, let me just remind you, if you enjoy our podcasts, if you do indeed enjoy our podcasts, please click on our Patreon link, and that's at Patreon. Click on the link and give us a hand. It would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. And so now, going out to Kimberley, BC, from Radisson, Saskatchewan, we have with us Kevin Miller. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good to be here.
Thank you. And how did a nice, upstanding young man such as yourself get from Foam Lake, Saskatchewan, near Foam Lake, to a career as a film producer and editor and book editor and producer, and now you're an author in your own right, W-R-I-T-E. So give us a little bit of your background there, please, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I grew up on a farm just outside of Foam Lake, and at a pretty early age, I got excited about films, comic books. I was really into sci-fi and fantasy and that sort of thing. But growing up on a farm where my dad farmed with his dad, and they're both very practical, and as were all the men in my life, the idea of going off and becoming a writer or a filmmaker didn't seem like a very viable opportunity. You just wonder, is there a road that leads from Foam Lake to Hollywood or some of these other places I wanted to go? But eventually, I got a job. So I kind of did what a lot of people who go into a creative background do: is they try and put a fallback plan into place. So I went to university and got a degree or two, and I had at least a means of having a viable occupation. And almost as soon as I graduated, I went off and got a job as a journalist, actually, up in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. I got a job as a reporter. And for the first time, my parents realized, you can actually make money as a writer. And so they got behind me. And eventually I found my way from there into publishing and then into the film industry, where I worked for several years. Actually, I just even released a film this year, partly doing feature film stuff and partly working on documentaries. But I think my love has always been novels. I kind of had this dream of wanting to be, a great Canadian novelist. And I eventually found my way back to books, and so that's I have a novel series called the Milligan Creek series. I just published the 5th book called Snowbound, and it's directed at middle grade readers, so kids ages 8 to 12. But I think adults can enjoy the books too. And I'm pretty, even though I don't live in Saskatchewan right now, I love Saskatchewan. I own some property there, actually part of my grandparents' farm, and I hope to return there permanently again one day. But my books are set in a fictional version of the town I grew up in, and I'm pretty hardcore about keeping my writing on the prairies.
And some of the characters in your books, the Snowbound is the latest one. I have a copy of it right in front of me, with a kid doing some spectacular crash after going over a hill with his skis, and so we'll see what happens in that one. Or it looks like he's going to land on his head, but we'll find out. Any of the characters, I guess they have to be kind of based on some of the kids you grew up with?
Yeah, the Milligan Creek series, it focuses on 4 friends, four boys, and kind of the supporting cast. There's a whole bunch of other people that pop up, and yeah, I think they were initially based on some people I knew, but they tended to become their own people. And the same with other characters in the community. As a writer, you always, the world is your raw material, so there's names, there's characteristics, and that sort of thing that come into the books. There's one woman in there who I have a lot of fun writing. She shows up in all my books, named Mrs. Muller, and my mother swears every time she reads my book, she thinks that Mrs. Muller is her, because they share a lot of things in common in terms of personality. But yeah, my mom may have slightly influenced her, but yeah, I definitely began, I think, inspired by real people. But the cool thing about working with a cast of characters, now that I'm 5 books into the series, is that they really take on a life of their own. So you always start a book with an idea for where the story's going to go, but I always say my characters have better ideas than I do, and And once you get them going and put them in situations, they tend to take the story in directions that you never anticipated. So it makes writing exciting because you sit down every day and you never quite know where you're going to end up.
Kevin Miller is with us. We're talking about his Milligan Creek series, which also has a companion book, more or less, Randolph the Yellow Snowman. We'll get to that in a minute. But Kevin, yeah, I've heard that a lot from fiction writers, because I am not a fiction writer. I've tried numerous times. I've got a couple of books in the bottom drawer, as it were, but they just, when I look at them, I know that something's missing. They just don't do it. And I've heard that a lot from your contemporaries, that once you start writing with a character or a series of characters, they tend, as you said, take on a life of their own. And how is that possible? I don't understand how that works.
Well, that's the thing I puzzle over as well, because I've been at this a long time. I've been writing professionally for about 25 years, and I really come to think of the creative process not as an act of creation, but an act of discovery. It almost feels when you're writing that these people and places and events exist, and your job as a writer is to go out and find them. And then once you're writing, it's almost like you're describing what's happening as opposed to creating. So it's almost a mystical process, I would say. And it's interesting because I'm working on a new series right now. It's for slightly older kids, and it's kind of like along the lines of Stranger Things in terms of its, I call it sort of light horror. It's a little bit scary stuff, and it's a completely new world, a new cast of characters. And I have to say the writing process is slower because it's taking time for me to get to know the world and the characters. But it's funny how slowly things begin to emerge, and so I can move forward. So it's very difficult to understand the creative process, but because as a writer, I've actually taught creative writing as well for almost 2 decades, and there's a lot of things you can learn about writing, but the process, when it comes down to it, I think the best writing, you're always writing from your gut rather than your head. And I think that makes it better for the reader too, because if the writer doesn't know what's going to happen next, or at least they don't know exactly what the path is going to be between points A, B, and C, well, the readers are definitely not going to guess it, because the writer's not going to be subconsciously dropping hints along the way.
And I heard the same thing. There's a couple of people, actually, or more than one, have said that. One that comes to mind right now is a guy from Saskatoon here, Jason Schoonover, we had on the program a while back. It's still up there, folks, at www.talkingbooks.tk. Just look for Jason Schoonover. He was saying the same thing. He's writing along one of his stories, and he'll burst out laughing because the character said something that he thought was really funny, but he didn't know where it came from.
Well, it does make, after the fact, once the book is out there, or I felt the same way with movies I've worked on, if I've written and edited and that sort of thing, is you almost look at it after the fact, and you almost don't understand how it happened. You were there when it happened, but now that it's there, it's like, wow, it's almost like it happened despite me.
We had a guy on, Kim Mitchell, a famous Canadian rock star from Max Webster, and Kim Mitchell with the patio lanterns and Gopher Soda, stuff like that. And he said he writes a song. He doesn't think of him as the creator. He just thinks of him as the roadie, because the song is there and he just has to take care of it and get it to where it's supposed to go and then take it somewhere else. Is that kind of the way you feel too?
Yeah, well, I think, good. Kim Mitchell, I rocked out to him many times in the past. I think even the idea of a midwife, like you're almost facilitating, because, what will happen, like my next book in the Milligan Creek series is, it's going to revolve around a movie that is being shot near Milligan Creek, and how these boys get entangled with the production. And, I had that idea because when we moved to Kimberley in 2013, we only found out this year that as we were getting settled in Kimberley, about 2.5 hours down the road, Christopher Nolan was filming Interstellar in Alberta, and we just love that movie and would have been so excited to go and watch some of it being filmed, but we weren't aware of it. But that sparked this idea of what if a short film contest happens right outside or in Milligan Creek to celebrate the opening of the new movie theater, and the boys catch wind of a real movie that's being filmed nearby, and they get this crazy idea of what if we can sneak onto the set and use their sets to film our short film. So that's sort of where the idea begins. But as I began to outline the story and bring other characters on the board, it takes it in so many different ways that, yeah, it's like once the spark happens, then it's almost like stand back and watch to see what they do with it.
And Kevin Miller is with us, and one of the reasons why I wanted to chat with Kevin for talkingbooks.tk was an article we read in Bridges, a weekly that comes out from Saskatoon, talked about Snowbound, Book 5 in the Milligan Creek series. So, Kevin Miller, tell us a little about the anecdote about the smoldering reading light from when you were a kid.
Yeah, well, I wrote that piece. I spent a lot of happy nights reading in bed, and I shared a bedroom with my brother on the farm. And just because he was 3 years younger than me and he went to bed earlier, to try and make the room a little bit dimmer, I put my T-shirt over top of my reading lamp, which was attached to the wall. It happened to be one of those polyester T-shirts that a lot of us wore back in the 80s that had a photograph on the front of it. And a short time later, my dad and my uncle came into the bedroom, and they thought something was burning. And sure enough, my shirt had a big dark hole, or like a big dark patch on it. Probably was moments away from bursting into flame because it was over top of this light bulb. And I hadn't smelled a thing because I was so caught up in what I was reading.
So you were reading while this was going on. It wasn't you'd fallen asleep or something. It was right beside you and you didn't know it.
I didn't even smell it, probably because it just gradually, the smell probably increased gradually, and I didn't even realize. I was so shocked, wondering why they were coming into my room.
We're talking with Kevin Miller. Started out in journalism in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. I'm assuming that was a weekly paper.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And, that was one of the best ways to learn how to write, because prior to working at the paper, I was the kind of writer, like many people are at the beginning, is they start something, but they never finish it. So they've got a pile of stuff that they started but never finished. Well, in my first week on the job, myself and another reporter had been hired at the same time, and we had to not only write all the stories and take all the photographs, we also had to figure out how to do the layout and have it all done within 5 days, having never done any. I had zero background as a reporter. So, boy, that's a good way to figure out how to finish what you start. And I found that was really a great training for all kinds of writing.
Did you go to university in Regina or Saskatoon or where?
I went actually at Waterloo in Ontario.
Oh, well, there you go. That's where all the techies are.
Yeah. Well, one of my housemates, I was there in '93, and he had something new and fabulous called the internet hooked right up to the house, which nobody had at that time.
Wow.
And he was already working for Microsoft as he was in university.
Was that dial-up or?
Yeah, it would have been some kind of a dial-up, I think, yeah.
That's great. Kitchener-Waterloo Dutchman, famous senior hockey team from the old days.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, filmmaking. Now, how'd you get from journalism Meadow Lake to filmmaking? What kind of transition was that, and how did that come about?
Well, I always was a very ambitious young guy, and so once I had a background in filmmaking, in journalism, I tried to move on closer to where I wanted to be. So I moved to BC. I got married. I married a young woman from Meadow Lake named Heidi, and we moved out to BC, and I got a job in publishing. And so I spent some time working for a publisher, eventually became an in-house writer. And in the meantime, I was just developing my craft as a screenwriter. And I took a sabbatical in Hawaii with my wife and our first two kids. And I just happened to meet while I was there a young director who was between projects and named David Cunningham. And so I started pitching ideas at him. And one of those ideas hit. And it was a movie called After. And it was quite an interesting development process, because After is about these people called urban explorers, who are people who explore off-limits urban environments as a hobby. And we came up with this idea about, what would be the most exciting city to do urban exploring in. and we came up with Moscow in Russia. So we ended up hooking up with some real urban explorers online, and we flew to Moscow and we went urban exploring under the city with them as a form of research. And it was we probably should have just filmed a documentary of our adventures under Moscow, which involved all kinds of things, including running from the police eventually. But that became a small horror movie called After, and that led me to working on other feature film stuff, and then I came to specialize in documentaries, feature-length documentaries, partly because the first one I worked on, which was a film called Expelled with Ben Stein, it was successful, and once you become successful in one arena in the film industry, people tend to think that's all you can do, and so the next thing you know is you find yourself just doing nothing but documentaries. But I actually really enjoyed it. I began as a writer, and I eventually learned how to edit, and then I became a director and producer as well. And so it's a very fulfilling, once you're wearing all those hats, it's a very fulfilling occupation. In fact, the last film I did, it's a film, it came out this year, it's called JES USA. I filmed the entire thing with my 18-year-old son at the time. We were a two-man crew, and it's funny because the credits for the film either go to me or to my son. I think we brought in a couple of people afterwards to help with sound design and color correction. That was about it.
Expelled Ben Stein, is that the Take Ben Stein's Money guy?
Yeah, the same guy.
Yeah, I've
Bueller.
Yes. Kevin Miller is with us. You've talked on your website about having writing workshops and things like that. However, the pandemic seems to have shut that down a bit. So how are you dealing with that these days? Yeah,
I've been so busy with the things I've been doing, I haven't focused on that yet. But so for the last 4 years, I've been touring all across Western Canada, particularly Saskatchewan. And I've been doing day-long writing workshops at schools all over the place, and it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. So I am, at this point this year, offering some virtual writing workshops. It's not as much fun, of course, as being there in person, and my workshops are very interactive, and so I really like to work with kids to help them develop story ideas, and so we do a lot of brainstorming together as a group, and then I have them write a scene based on what we come up with, and it never ceases to amaze me at how creative these young minds are. And I could spend the rest of my career working on the ideas that I've developed with thousands of students across the country. So, but yeah, I will be in the new year doing some virtual writing workshops as well.
And your website is what again? Tell us your website, please.
Yeah, it's kevinmillerxi.com, and the XI comes from the Internet Movie Database, where I'm the 11th Kevin Miller on the database. Now there's probably dozens of us, but yeah, so kevinmillerxi.com. You can look at my books and read a little bit about me there.
I thought that was the reason. I thought it was because you were the 11th Kevin Miller trying to get a website, but that makes even more sense.
Yeah.
What's your, these days, meaning last 6 months and probably into the next 6 or 7 months, who knows, what kind of daily routine do you have then, or now?
Well, I work from home, which I have done for almost 2 decades now, I guess, and so I spend some time working on my own projects. I actually do some editing for other authors as well, so I sort of divide my time between that. I'm as every writer is doing, they're always trying to transition to make writing their complete full-time thing. And writing has been my full-time gig for, off and on throughout the last couple of decades. But once I moved out of film and transitioned into books, I'm kind of in that process again. But yeah, so I'm very close to the place where basically all I'll just be doing is working on my own books. And that's where, I'm expanding. So I have the Milligan Creek series. I've got this other new series that I'm working on. And then books like Randolph, The Yellow Snowman, which is a book I'm really excited about, actually. It's a picture book for kids. I have another picture book called The Moody Bee, which I published a few years ago. And Randolph is I collaborated actually with a friend of my daughter's she's only 18 years old, but I've been watching her for a while. She would post her artwork on Instagram and eventually reached a point where, I just thought she has gotten to be so good. I thought, man, I really would love to work with her. So her name is Hannah Dirksen. She also lives in Kimberley. And so I pitched her the idea of working on the story, and I just thought she did a fantastic job with the book.
I know I have it in front of me. It's Randolph, the Yellow Snowman. We won't go giving away the plot, but you better not go where the Huskies go if you know what we're talking about. So that's out now, Randolph, the Yellow Snowman, but it's a story that's not just necessarily, let's say, holiday Christmas oriented. It could be anybody, anywhere, at any time could pick it up and have a good time with it. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. I call it a winter-themed book. I mean, it takes place right before Christmas, but yeah, it's not necessarily a Christmas book, but it's a good book to read in the winter or any time. And yeah, it's kind of having fun with this idea of yellow snow, and it's about if a yellow snowman mysteriously appears in this small town, and everyone panics because they don't, they're all terrified of what it is made of, but the question is, how do they get rid of it? So I tried to write it in such a way that the panic and the ridiculousness of the townspeople grows, and that's the kind of book I love reading. I have 4 kids, and I loved reading those types of books to my kids growing up, and so I hope people enjoy it. I have actually a Halloween themed book that I'm looking to picture book that I'm looking to bring out next year as well.
So instead of calling them comics, we should call them graphic novels or picture books. I like the picture book idea. That's good because it doesn't necessarily categorize it in any certain niche, right? You can just say, oh yeah, I've got a good picture book, you should take a look at it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of a storybook, like the typical thing you would read to a kid ages, say, 3 to 6, that type of thing. I do comic books as well, although I have a comic book series called Meth the Immortal, which is about an immortal pig named Methuselah. But at this point, that's on hold right now. I've done a few issues of that, but I'm setting that aside for the moment. I may come back and do another graphic novel because I really would like to continue his adventures in the future.
Kevin Miller is talking with us. Grew up in and around the Foam Lake area. Do you know that Foam Lake has a lot of famous people come out of it, including yourself?
I do, actually, yeah. Bernie Federico, for one, which is somebody that a lot of people will recognize. And Pat Elnick, another hockey player, and my sister. Actually, my sister is Tanya Miller. She's a conductor. She was the conductor of the assistant conductor in Vancouver at the Symphony, and then she was actually the conductor of the Victoria Symphony for I think 15 years, and has conducted over the world.
Well, you know what? I'm sending you a copy of my book, The Great Canadian Notebook, and we have a section in there all about famous people who came out of Little Foam Lake, and your sister's one of them. So,
isn't that neat? That's cool.
It was
She'll be thrilled to hear that.
I just did that didn't talk to anybody. We just did, my wife actually helped a lot with that one. Just did internet research and stuff and came across the fact that there was, like you said, a gazillion people from Foam Lake who have made more than their mark in the world. And now we can add, of course, Kevin Miller to that list. When you were growing up, you did a lot of reading and writing, of course, because you just told us about the lamp almost catching on fire and burning down the whole house. Did you have favorite writers back then?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I loved Gordon Corman. I really enjoyed Farley Mowat as well. As in terms of Canadian writers, I read a lot of their stuff, and I also was big into science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke, to me, was the granddaddy of the great science fiction writers. Edgar Rice Burroughs. I read a lot of Stephen King, actually, when I got a bit older. And I also, people like Ray Bradbury, Tolkien, Piers Anthony, people like that. So I was into a lot of that sort of thing. Andre Norton.
My brother read Andre Norton. I didn't. I was more of your Hardy Boys kind of guy. And And Agatha Christie. I read a lot of Agatha Christie books, and I'm rediscovering her work now. And she was a lot, I think, more creative and funny and witty than maybe people remember her or think of her as being. Because actually, how do I go to sleep? Is I put in an audio book, and most of them are Agatha Christie books. So,
okay,
she's very good. There was one, one that stood up. Oh, sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, no, nothing. I was just going to say I've actually never read one of her books. That's somebody I should read.
Well, there's lots of good stuff. The famous one is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which has a cute twist ending. Suggestions for would-be writers. I guess the only thing to say is just write.
Yeah, writing is, it's even for people who do it professionally, it can be agony sometimes, but it can also be agonizing not to write. Like I find when I'm pulled in different directions and I just really want to be working on a book, and especially when I'm, midway through a novel or something, I just want to set everything aside and see it right through to the end. But yeah, so being persistent. My sister, actually, the conductor, Tanya, she's in the process of learning how to be a writer right now as well, and she's just amazingly diligent. But you need to, if you're serious about writing, you need to write, and I would say virtually every day. I think it's really important to read books on writing, and also to be analytical about the stuff that you enjoy reading, and try and figure out how it works, why it doesn't work, and that sort of thing. One of the best things for me has been being an editor as well as a writer. I spent so much time working on other people's work that it really helps you cut to the chase in terms of what works and what doesn't, and you see different styles and that sort of thing. So the other thing too is, I always say when I talk to kids, is that writer's block is really a form of perfectionism. And that's the real killer of a writer. And you need to give yourself permission to make mistakes, to take chances, and to fail. And because if you are worried about getting perfect out of the gate, you're just going to freeze. And you're going to be afraid to put anything down on the page. And as we talked about at the beginning, writing, it's not about, you don't begin writing with a bunch of answers. You should begin with a bunch of questions. And so writing becomes an act of exploration. And hopefully the writing process is, you discover something at the other end. And that's, I think that makes for the best writing, because there's that excitement of the journey that I think will come through to the person who reads it as well.
Well, the best textbook, if you will, of that era or genre I can think of is On Writing by Stephen King. And he just says pretty much the same thing. I have the perfectionist block. I'll go 6 months before doing anything because I'm afraid that it's not going to be perfect. So,
yeah.
But On Writing... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, everyone battles that on one level or another. I should mention, Stephen King was so influential on me, not only just reading his books, but way back, I would have been in grade 11 or 12. I got this book. It was like a digest of articles on writing. And there was an article in there by Stephen King called Everything You Need to Know About Writing in 10 Minutes. And in it, he tells a story, which he later adapted into the book On Writing, about him turning in his first paper, or his first article for the high school newspaper, and how it got edited, and I think it was for the community newspaper, and how he learned so much. I just remember he, for some reason, made writing tangible for me as somebody who was aspiring to do it. He made it seem like it was actually possible for someone like me, and he set the bar really low. He said, you know what, if you write something and somebody pays you for it, and you pay your lighting bill with that money, he goes, you're a professional. And I thought, well, I can do that. And, so that it gave me confidence to at least try. And, another shout out I want to give is, as far as, things too that influenced my writing is, comic books were really big to me as a teenager. And somebody who was so influential on me was a guy named Mike Feddick, who was my grade 9 and 10 social studies teacher. And he was a total comic book nut. And, he was also really encouraging. He was a writer as well, and he encouraged me to go for it. So, I think having people in your life that don't look at you like you're crazy if you say you want to be a writer or a filmmaker, that's important to, try and get some of those people in your life as well.
And yes, and speaking of Stephen King again, I know that article of which you speak, it was about a sports writer for high school basketball game, something like that.
That's right. And yeah, that's right.
Reading it, I said, oh man, I'm dead. This guy writes better in grade 9 than I ever will. And I kept thinking, and then I read his book about when his son's Little League team had a good seasonal run way back a few years back. And I said, he should have been he would have been the best sports writer since Grantland Rice and Jim Taylor and Denny Boyd, any of those guys. I thought his sports writing was just superb. Is like a nonfiction reportorial style. I can't even say the word, but it was excellent. So yes, everybody on this podcast, you and I say Get On Writing by Stephen King, if nothing else, just to give yourself encouragement. Kevin Miller, It's been grand. Where can we get your books? Anywhere and everywhere?
Sort of. I mean, you can well, yeah, pretty much, I think. So you can definitely get them on Amazon, Amazon.com, Amazon.ca. Chapters, Indigo. You can also get them on my website, kevinmillerxi.com. And so through Amazon, Kindle's publishing program, so the distribution is pretty wide. But yeah, if you just, Amazon is probably where most people shop, or Chapters Indigo, and they're available there.
And just before we say goodbye to Kevin Miller, a reminder, if you enjoyed this podcast, please click on our Patreon link. That's Patreon, and then go to Talking Books and maybe give us a hand. Thank you very much. And Kevin Miller, thank you very much, and continue having good luck and good fun in Kimberley, BC.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.